I'm Sadie, 32, stepping back into my mom's Ohio home for Thanksgiving, the air thick with pumpkin bread and memories. The familiar creak of the porch under my boots feels like a hug, but my store-bought pie. It's already earning smirks. My sister's sharp glance cuts deeper than the November chill, hinting I'm still the odd one out. There's a faded photo on the mantel, me and her as kids laughing. Will this weekend mend us or break us more? Have you ever felt judged by those you love most? Share where you're watching from, hit like and subscribe to join this journey. The kitchen smelled of sage and simmering gravy, a warm chaos of clinking pots and my mom's soft humming. I stood at the counter slicing carrots, my thrift store coat still draped over a chair. Hannah hovered near the stove, her sleek ponytail swinging as she stirred the cranberry sauce. Ryan, her fiancé, leaned against the fridge, his polished shoes gleaming under the fluorescent light. I tried to blend into the rhythm, laughing at Mom's story about burning last year's stuffing, but my voice felt too loud, too eager. Hannah glanced over, her eyes narrowing slightly. Sadie, you're still freelancing, right? What's that like, scraping by on those little design gigs? Her tone was light, but the words landed like a slap. I forced a smile, my knife pausing mid-cut. It's steady, I said. Pays the bills. Ryan chuckled, twirling his expensive watch. Steady. Sounds like hustling to me. What do you even make, like $20 a logo? The air tightened. Mom looked up from the turkey, her hands still but her face unreadable. I waited for her to say something, anything to soften the sting. Instead, she turned back to basting her silence louder than Hannah's jab. My cheeks burned and I focused on the carrots, each slice deliberate, trying to anchor myself. I wanted to tell them about the clients I'd landed, the late nights that turned sketches into campaigns, but the words stuck in my throat. Hannah didn't let up. Ryan and I just closed on a condo. 3 bedrooms, city view. You should see it, Sadie. Oh wait, you probably can't afford the gas to visit. She laughed and Ryan joined in, their voices weaving a wall I couldn't climb. I glanced at Greg, my stepdad, hoping for a distraction, but he was glued to the football game in the living room, oblivious. The kitchen felt smaller, the walls pressing in as their laughter echoed. I tried to pivot, asking Mom about her recipe for the green bean casserole, but Hannah cut in again. You know, Sadie, it's cute how you're still so simple, like no pressure, just floating along. Her words dripped with pity, and I felt my pulse quicken. I wanted to scream that I wasn't floating, that I'd built something real, but doubt crept in. Was I fooling myself? Maybe they were right. Maybe I was still the kid who never quite measured up. The back door creaked and I seized the chance to escape, mumbling about needing air. Outside, the November dusk wrapped around me, the cold biting my knuckles as I gripped the porch railing. I could still hear Hannah's voice through the window now, whispering to Ryan. She's always been the broke one, hasn't she? My breath caught and I stared at the frost-dusted lawn, remembering how I used to run through this yard with Hannah, chasing fireflies, dreaming of futures that felt endless. How did we get here? The porch boards creaked under my weight as I leaned against the railing, my breath fogging in the twilight. Inside, the clatter of dishes and Hannah's sharp laugh pierced the quiet. I wanted to march back in to tell them I wasn't some failure clinging to scraps, but my feet stayed rooted. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a client email about a deadline, but I ignored it. All I could hear was Hannah's whisper, branding me the broke one like a label I'd never peel off. I wandered to the edge of the yard, where Mom's old rose bushes stood brittle and bare. As kids, Hannah and I would pick those roses for her, giggling as thorns pricked our fingers. Now those memories felt like lies, overshadowed by her pitying stares. I kicked at a loose stone, my frustration bubbling. Why did I care so much what she thought? But I did. I always had. Back inside the kitchen was louder steam rising from pots as Mom barked orders. I slipped in, hoping to blend back into the chaos, but Ryan caught my eye. There she is, he said, his grin too wide. Thought you'd run off to budget your pie money. Hannah snorted, spooning mashed potatoes into a bowl. Ryan, stop, she's sensitive, she said, but her tone mocked me more than his words. I gripped the counter, my nails digging into the chipped linoleum, and forced a laugh. Just needed some air, I mumbled, hating how small my voice sounded. Mom handed me a stack of plates to set the table, her fingers brushing mine. I searched her face for a hint of support, but she was already turning away, fussing over the gravy. Greg shuffled in, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Food ready yet?" he grunted, barely glancing at me. I nodded, carrying the plates to the dining room, each step heavier than the last. The table was set with Mom's good china, the kind we only used for holidays, but even that felt wrong, like I didn't belong at this polished version of our family. As I arranged the napkins, Hannah sauntered in, her perfume sharp and expensive. "You know Sadie? I was telling Ryan about that time you tried selling lemonade in high school. 50 cents a cup and you still went broke." She laughed, adjusting a fork. "Some things never change." My stomach twisted, the memory stinging. I'd spent hours on that stand, proud of every quarter, only for Hannah to call it pathetic back then, too. I opened my mouth to snap back, but Ryan appeared, slinging an arm around her. "Babe, let's not pile on. Sadie's doing her best, right?" His pity was worse than her scorn. I busied myself with the silverware, my hands trembling. The room filled with cousins and aunts, their chatter a dull roar, but I felt alone, like a ghost in my own family. Lila, my cousin, slipped in beside me, her shy smile a small comfort. "Ignore them," she whispered, squeezing my arm. "They're just loud." I nodded, grateful, but the weight in my chest didn't lift. Lila's kindness was a flicker in the dark, but it couldn't drown out the voices in my head, echoing Hannah's words, Ryan's laughs, Mom's silence. Dinner was moments away and I dreaded it. The table would be a stage, their jabs sharper with everyone watching. I caught my reflection in the dining room mirror, my face pale, my sweater frayed at the cuffs. I looked like the Sadie they saw, not the one who'd clawed her way to something bigger. My phone buzzed again, another work email, a reminder of the life I'd hidden to avoid their judgment. But hiding hadn't saved me. It had only made the cuts deeper. The dining room buzzed with clinking glasses and overlapping voices, the table groaning under platters of turkey and stuffing. I slid into my seat, the chipped mug I'd grabbed from the kitchen warm in my hands, its familiar weight grounding me. Across from me, Hannah glowed in a cashmere sweater, her laughter sharp as she recounted a work trip to Paris. Ryan sat beside her, carving the turkey with a flourish, his charm pulling smiles from everyone. Everyone but me. I passed the sweet potatoes, trying to focus on the food, the warmth anything but the knot in my chest. Then Hannah's eyes locked on the pie I'd brought, sitting unopened at the table's edge. "Oh, Sadie's contribution," she said, her voice dripping with amusement. "Store-bought, right? Did you get it from the clearance rack?" The table erupted in chuckles, forks pausing mid-air. My face burned and I gripped my mug tighter, the old crack under my thumb biting into my skin. Ryan leaned forward, his grin wide. "Come on, Hannah. Give her a break. Sadie's probably saving up for..." What a new sketchbook, more laughter louder now, rippling through aunts and cousins. I forced a tight smile, my throat dry. "It's just pie," I said, but my voice barely carried. Hannah tilted her head, mock pity in her eyes. "Just pie. Sadie, it's kind of your whole vibe. No offense." I glanced at Mom seated at the table's head. Her hands folded tightly. She met my eyes for a split second before looking down, adjusting her napkin. Her silence was a punch worse than Hannah's words. Greg at the other end snorted. "Some people don't bother with fancy. Nothing wrong with that." His tone implied the opposite, his gaze flicking to me like I was a stray dog at the table. My fork trembled as I pushed a green bean around my plate, appetite gone. The chatter resumed, but every laugh felt aimed at me. I caught Lila's sympathetic glance from across the table, her quiet nod urging me to hang on. But the room was suffocating, the air thick with judgment. Hannah leaned toward Ryan, her voice low but clear. She's still living like she's in college, crashing on couches, scraping by. It's sad, really. My heart pounded, each word a stone piling on my chest. I wanted to scream that I wasn't that girl, that I'd built something they couldn't imagine, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I stood my chair, scraping the floor. "I need a second," I muttered, heading for the hallway bathroom. Eyes followed me, whispers trailing. Inside, I locked the door and leaned over the sink, splashing cold water on my face. My reflection stared back, eyes red, jaw tight. I'd come here hoping for family, for warmth. Instead, I was a punchline. My phone buzzed in my pocket, another work email, a reminder of the life I'd kept secret. I ignored it, my anger flaring. Why did I let them do this to me? The bathroom sink dripped, each plink echoing in the dim light. As I gripped the counter, my knuckles pale. My reflection felt like a stranger's eyes, hollow from holding back tears. Outside the dining room, pulsed through the walls, laughter spiking over the clatter of plates. I wanted to stay hidden, to let the night swallow me, but I couldn't. They'd notice, and Hannah would twist my absence into another jab. I wiped my face with a scratchy towel, forcing my breath to steady, and stepped back into the fray. The table was louder now. Dessert plates scattered with crumbs. I slid into my seat, avoiding eyes, but Hannah's voice cut through the noise. Sadie, you missed Aunt Carol's story. She was just saying how hard it is to make it these days. You'd probably relate. Her smile was a blade, and the table's attention swung to me. Aunt Carol nodded, oblivious, but Ryan pounced. Yeah, Sadie, you're like the poster child for grit, right? Living that minimalist dream. The room chuckled and my chest tightened, each laugh a weight I couldn't shake. I stared at my untouched pie slice, the crust crumbling under my fork. Lila reached for my hand under the table, her fingers warm, but it wasn't enough. Mom was deep in conversation with Greg, her back to me as if I'd vanished. I wanted her to turn to see me, to stop this, but she didn't. She never did. Greg's voice boomed suddenly, cutting through the chatter. You know, some folks just coast, taking up space, expecting handouts. He didn't look at me, but his words landed like a fist. The table went quiet. Forks stilled, and I felt every eye on me. Hannah leaned back, smirking, while Ryan sipped his wine, amused. My throat burned, and I pushed my chair back, the scrape loud in the silence. I'm not coasting, I said, my voice low but shaking. No one responded. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for me to crack. I stood, my napkin falling to the floor, and walked to the living room, my steps unsteady. The fireplace crackled, casting shadows on the walls, but it offered no warmth. I sank onto the couch, my hands twisting in my lap. Memories flooded in, uninvited Hannah stealing my spotlight at school recitals, Mom brushing off my hurt, saying siblings fight. It wasn't fighting, it was erasure. And now here I was, still invisible, still the joke. My phone buzzed again, a notification from my assistant about a client meeting tomorrow. I swiped it away, my anger flaring. I'd built a life they couldn't fathom, but I'd hidden it, afraid of their judgment. And for what? To sit here swallowing their poison. The dining room erupted in laughter again, Hannah's voice rising above the rest, recounting some old story about my failed art projects. Each word was a nail pinning me to this moment, this house, this family that didn't see me. I clutched the couch cushion, my nails digging in, and felt something inside me start to break. The living room felt too warm, the fireplace's glow mocking my churning thoughts. I sat rigid on the couch, the cushion's worn fabric rough under my palms, as voices from the dining room spilled over, Hannah's laugh slicing through me. My phone lay heavy in my pocket, its silent hum a reminder of the world I'd kept secret. I was done hiding, but the weight of their judgment pinned me in place. Then a low rumble shook the air, a plane passing close, its roar rattling the windows. Ryan's voice cut through the chatter. Whoa, that's loud. What's landing out there? He stood crossing to the bay window, his silhouette sharp against the dusk. The others followed, curious, their dessert plates forgotten. I stayed seated, my heart thudding, knowing exactly what was out there. My jet, my truth, idling at the airstrip a mile away. I'd arranged it for a quick exit tomorrow, never expecting this moment. Ryan peered out, squinting. Is that a private jet fancy for this town? His tone was playful, but then he turned, his eyes landing on me with a smirk. Sadie, that your ride? The room burst into laughter, heads swiveling my way. Hannah joined him at the window, her arms crossed. Oh, please, Sadie. A jet. She can't even afford a decent coat. The mockery was sharp, each chuckle a jab to my ribs. My fingers tightened around my phone, a text from my assistant glowing landed. "Ready when you are, Ms. Harper." I froze my breath shallow. The pin on my jacket, a small silver logo matching the jet's tail, felt like it was burning through the fabric. No one had noticed it all day, but now it was a spotlight I couldn't escape. Lila, perched on the armrest nearby, leaned closer, her voice soft. "You okay, Sadie? You look pale." I nodded barely, my mind racing. They thought this was a joke, but the truth was right there, staring them down through the glass. Mom stood by the fireplace, her face unreadable, but her eyes flickered with something new, suspicion maybe, or fear. She'd heard Ryan's quip, and now she was watching me, waiting. The room's laughter faded, replaced by an expectant hush. Ryan turned back to the window, his grin widening. "No way. Sadie, you got a sugar daddy out there or what?" His challenge sparked more chuckles, and Hannah's cackle followed, high and cruel. My vision blurred, not with tears, but with a rage I'd buried for years. I stood my legs unsteady and took a step toward the window. The jet's lights blinked in the distance, a beacon of everything I'd built, everything they'd never seen. My voice, when it came, was low, trembling. "It's not a joke." The room stilled, forks clinking against plates. Hannah's smile faltered, and Ryan raised an eyebrow, amused but curious. I felt the weight of every eye, every doubt, and something inside me snapped, ready to spill. My words hung in the air, sharp and unsteady, as the room's silence swallowed them. Every face turned to me, some amused, others confused, but Hannah's was a mask of disbelief. "What's not a joke?" she snapped, stepping closer, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "You're seriously claiming that's your jet, Sadie? Come on." Her laugh was brittle, daring me to prove her wrong. Ryan folded his arms, his smirk unwavering. "This I gotta hear. Lay it out, Sadie." My mouth went dry, my pulse hammering in my ears. The jet's lights pulsed outside, a steady rhythm against the darkening sky. But here, under their stares, I felt exposed, raw. I'd kept my success locked away, not out of shame, but to protect it from their judgment. Now it was spilling out, and I couldn't stop it. My fingers brushed the pin on my jacket, its cool metal grounding me for a split second. Hannah didn't wait for my answer. "You're delusional," she said, her voice rising, drawing more eyes. "You show up with a dollar store pie and that sad sweater and expect us to believe you're some hotshot, please." The room stirred, murmurs rippling through cousins and uncles. Aunt Carol tilted her head, curious but skeptical. Greg scoffed from the doorway, beer in hand. "Girls lost it," he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Mom's gaze burned into me. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but she stayed silent, her hands twisting a dish towel. That hurt more than Hannah's words, more than the laughter starting to bubble up again. Lila stood frozen by the couch, her eyes wide, pleading with me to hold on. But the room was closing in their doubts, a chorus I couldn't drown out. My phone buzzed again, another message from my assistant, but I didn't look. It was too late to hide. Ryan strode to the window, peering out with exaggerated interest. "Okay, Sadie, let's play along. If that's your jet. Where's the proof? Call your pilot, wave him down." His challenge sparked more chuckles, and Hannah jumped in, her voice venomous. "She's lying, Ryan. She's always been desperate for attention. Remember her little art shows? Total flops." The memory stung, each word a reminder of every time she'd diminished me. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. My chest ached like all the air had been sucked out. The truth was right there, idling on that airstrip, but saying it felt like stepping off a cliff. They wouldn't believe me. They'd twist it, mock it, make it another story to laugh at. My eyes stung, and I blinked hard, refusing to let them see me break. Hannah took another step, her face inches from mine. "Admit it, Sadie. You're making this up, and it's pathetic." The room spun, their faces blurring into a haze of pity and scorn. My hands shook, my nails digging into my palms. I wanted to run, to disappear, but there was nowhere to go. The jet outside was mine, but in here I was still the failure they'd always seen. My voice was gone. my strength crumbling, and all I could feel was the crushing weight of being unseen, unheard, undone. Hannah's words echoed in my ears, her accusation of desperation ringing like a bell I couldn't unhear. The living room felt like a trap, their stares pinning me in place. But something shifted inside me, a spark catching fire. I was done shrinking. My hand slipped into my pocket, fingers closing around my phone, its weight a quiet anchor. I took a breath, steadying myself, and stepped toward the door. "Let's go see it," I said, my voice low but clear, cutting through the murmurs. The room froze. Hannah's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing. "See what? Your imaginary jet?" she scoffed, but there was a crack in her confidence. Ryan raised an eyebrow, half amused, half curious. "You serious, Sadie?" he asked, leaning forward. I didn't answer, just pulled on my coat, the frayed cuffs brushing my wrists. "Come or don't," I said, already moving, the cold air hitting me as I stepped onto the porch. The November night was sharp, the sky a deep indigo, and the distant hum of the jet grounded me. I started walking toward the airstrip, my boots crunching on gravel, not looking back. Footsteps followed, hesitant at first, then louder. I glanced over my shoulder. Ryan was there, hands in his pockets, Hannah trailing with a scowl. Lila caught up her breath, puffing in the chill, her silent support a lifeline. Mom lingered at the edge, her silhouette uncertain in the doorway. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I'd spent so long hiding my design firm, my late nights turning ideas into a business that soared because I thought they'd tear it down. But their laughter, their pity, had already done that. No more. The airstrip's lights glowed ahead, the jet's sleek outline coming into view, its presence undeniable. My phone buzzed, a message from Marcus, my assistant pilot's ready. "Need anything?" I typed back. "Just wait." Hannah's voice broke the silence. "This is ridiculous, Sadie. You're embarrassing yourself." Her words were meant to sting, but they bounced off me now. I kept walking, the gravel path narrowing as we neared the airstrip's gate. Ryan chuckled. "Gotta hand it to you, Sadie. You're committed to the bit." I ignored him, my focus on the jet, its silver hull glinting under floodlights. The logo on its side matched the pin I wore, a quiet truth I'd carried all day. Lila whispered, "Is that really yours?" Her voice was soft, awed, and I nodded just once. Her eyes widened, a spark of pride I hadn't expected. It fueled me, pushed me forward. The gate was steps away, and beyond it the pilot stood waiting, his clipboard in hand. My chest tightened, not with doubt, but with the weight of what was coming. I wasn't just showing them a jet. I was showing them me, the Sadie they'd never bothered to see. The airstrip gate clanged as I pushed it open, the sound sharp in the quiet night. The jet loomed ahead, its engines idling with a low hum that vibrated through my bones. I walked forward, my steps steady, the cold air no longer biting but bracing. Behind me, Hannah's voice wavered. "Sadie, this is insane. Stop it." But I didn't turn. My eyes were on the pilot, Tom, who straightened as I approached, his nod professional. "Ms. Harper," he said, his voice calm, "all set for you." The words hit like a thunderclap. Ryan's laugh died mid-breath, and Hannah's footsteps faltered. I felt their stares, heavy and disbelieving, but I kept my gaze on Tom. "Thanks," I said, my voice, even though my heart raced. I turned to face them, the floodlights casting long shadows across their faces. Ryan's smirk was gone, replaced by a flicker of unease. Hannah's arms were crossed tight, her lips parted but silent. Lila's eyes shone with quiet awe, her hands clasped like she was witnessing something sacred. I took a breath, the words I'd buried for years rising. "This is mine," I said, gesturing to the jet. "My company, my work. I built it. Not a hustle, not a side gig. A design firm with clients across the country. That's what I've been doing while you laughed." My voice didn't shake, but it carried the weight of every sleepless night, every logo I'd poured my soul into, every doubt I'd fought to get here. Hannah's face twisted. "You're lying. You can't afford this." Her voice was shrill, but it cracked, betraying her. Ryan shifted, glancing at the jet, then back at me, his confidence unraveling. "Hold up," he said. "You're saying you own that?" "Like outright," I nodded, pulling out my phone. I opened an email from Marcus, my assistant, detailing a recent deal with a major brand. I held it up the screen, glowing. "Read it if you want." Lila stepped closer, peering at the screen, her gasp soft but audible. "Sadie, this is real," she whispered, her voice trembling with pride. Hannah snatched the phone, scrolling, her eyes darting over the words. She handed it back, her hands shaking, and said nothing. Ryan rubbed his neck, muttering, "Didn't see that coming." Their silence was louder than any apology, and it fueled me. I turned to Mom, who'd followed us out, standing apart, her face pale in the floodlights. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice small, almost lost in the hum of the jet. I swallowed the hurt, still raw. "I tried," I said. "You didn't listen. None of you did." Her eyes dropped, and for the first time I saw shame there, not just silence. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a start. I handed my phone to Lila, asking her to hold it, and walked toward the jet steps. Tom opened the door, the cabin's warm light spilling out. I paused, looking back at them, their figures small against the vast night. "You can come see it," I said, my voice steady, "or you can stay out here. Your choice." I didn't wait for their answer. I climbed the steps, my hand grazing the railing, and stopped at the threshold. The cabin smelled of leather and possibility, a world I'd built alone. I turned, meeting Hannah's eyes, and held her gaze unyielding, letting the truth settle between us. The jet's cabin door clicked shut behind me, muffling the night's chill and the weight of their stares. I stood in the aisle, the soft hum of the engines steadying my pulse, but my hands still trembled from the confrontation. Outside, through the small window, I saw them clustered near the airstrip gate, their figures lit by the floodlights. Hannah's arms were still crossed, her posture rigid. Ryan paced, his head shaking slightly. Lila clutched my phone, her face a mix of wonder and disbelief. Mom lingered at the back, her hands clasped tight, her eyes fixed on the jet. I sank into a leather seat, the cushion cool against my back, and let out a breath I'd been holding. The truth was out, raw and undeniable, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing naked in a storm, waiting for the lightning. I'd shown them my world, the one I'd built from scratch, but their silence now was heavier than their laughter had ever been. I pressed my forehead to the window, watching them, wondering what came next. The cabin door opened, and Tom, the pilot, leaned in. "They're asking to come aboard, Ms. Harper. Your call." His voice was neutral, professional, but it carried the weight of the moment. I hesitated, my fingers tracing the armrest's stitching. Part of me wanted to keep this space mine untouched by their doubts, but I nodded. "Let them in," I said, my voice quieter than I meant. Tom disappeared, and I braced myself, the hum of the jet no longer enough to calm the churn in my chest. They filed in slowly, their steps cautious, like they were stepping into a stranger's life. Lila came first, her eyes wide as she took in the polished wood and plush seats. She handed me my phone, whispering, "This is incredible, Sadie." Her awe was genuine, a small balm to the ache inside me. Ryan followed his usual swagger, subdued, his gaze darting over the cabin as if searching for a flaw to call my bluff. Hannah entered last, her face tight, her lips pressed into a thin line. Mom trailed behind, her eyes avoiding mine, her hands twisting the edge of her scarf. No one spoke at first. The air felt thick, charged with unspoken questions. Ryan cleared his throat, forcing a grin. "Nice setup, Sadie. Didn't peg you for the private jet type." His tone aimed for casual, but it fell flat, his eyes betraying a flicker of respect he couldn't hide. Hannah snorted, her voice sharp. "This doesn't prove anything. You could be leasing it or working for someone who does." Her words were a challenge, but they lacked the venom of before, as if she was grasping at straws. I didn't respond, just leaned back, letting the jet's quiet luxury speak for itself. My phone lit up with a new email from Marcus confirming a contract signed that morning, another milestone in a career they'd never seen. I set it face down on the table, the screen's glow catching Hannah's eye. She looked away, her jaw tight, and I saw it then, the crack in her armor, a mix of jealousy and something softer, maybe regret. But she didn't speak, and neither did I. The silence grew heavy, unbroken, each of us waiting for someone else to break it. The jet's cabin felt smaller with them inside their presence crowding the space I'd carved out for myself. I stayed seated, my hands resting on the table, the wood cool under my fingertips. Hannah stood rigid near the door, her eyes scanning the seats, the bar, anything but me. Ryan wandered deeper, touching the edge of a window shade, his forced casualness unraveling. Lila hovered by my side, her quiet warmth a tether, while Mom lingered at the threshold, half in, half out, her scarf now knotted in her hands. Ryan broke the silence again, his voice softer this time. "So what, you're some big deal now? How'd you pull this off?" He wasn't mocking, not exactly, but the question grated like he still couldn't believe I'd outdone him. I met his gaze steady. "Years of work," I said, each word deliberate. "Years you didn't see." His jaw twitched and he looked away out the window where the airstrip lights blurred into the night. Hannah shifted her heels, scuffing the carpet. "This doesn't change who you are, Sadie," she said, her voice low, almost a hiss. "You're still you." The words were meant to cut, but they trembled, betraying her. I saw it in her eyes, the flicker of doubt, the fear that she'd misjudged me all along. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The jet, the contracts, the life I'd built, they spoke louder than I ever could. Mom finally stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sadie, I didn't know." Her eyes were wet, her hands shaking as she clutched her scarf. I wanted to feel something, relief maybe, but all I felt was a dull ache. "You could have asked," I said, my tone flat, not cruel, but honest. She flinched and the space between us stretched, filled with years of missed chances. Lila reached out, touching my arm, her silent support a small light in the haze. Greg's voice came from outside, gruff and hesitant. "Sadie, you got a minute?" I glanced at the door, surprised he'd followed. He stood on the tarmac, his flannel jacket hunched against the cold. I stepped out, the night air sharp, and he shuffled, avoiding my eyes. "Didn't mean to pile on back there," he mumbled, kicking at the gravel. "You've done all right, kid." It was the closest he'd ever come to an apology, but it felt hollow, too late to mend the sting. Back inside, Hannah was whispering to Ryan, her words too low to catch, but her glances at me were heavy, conflicted. Ryan nodded, his usual bravado muted, and I caught him stealing looks at the jet's interior like he was recalculating me. The cabin was quiet now, the hum of the engines the only sound, and it pressed against us, forcing us to sit with the truth. I'd shown them everything, and it had shifted something, but not enough to heal the cracks. I leaned back in my seat, my hands still, my chest tight. Their reactions, their half-words, their stunned silence. It was all I'd get tonight. I'd wanted them to see me, but now that they had, I felt emptier, like I'd poured myself out and found nothing to fill the space. The jet's lights flickered outside, steady, unyielding, but inside I was adrift, caught between the woman I'd become and the girl they'd always known. The morning sun spilled through the kitchen window, painting the linoleum in soft gold. I sat at the counter, a mug of coffee warming my hands, the house quiet except for the faint creak of floorboards upstairs. Last night's chaos at the airstrip felt distant, like a dream I'd woken from, but the weight of it lingered in my bones. I'd packed my bag, ready to leave, but I wasn't rushing. For the first time in years, I wanted to linger, to let this place settle into me. I traced the rim of my mug, thinking of the girl who'd grown up here, sketching in the attic, dreaming of a life bigger than this town. That girl had been so afraid of failing, of never being enough. I wasn't her anymore, but she was still part of me, her hopes woven into every choice I'd made. The jet, the firm, they weren't just wins, they were promises I'd kept to her. Footsteps broke my thoughts, and Lila appeared, her hair messy from sleep. She slid onto a stool beside me, cradling a bowl of cereal. "You're up early," she said, her voice soft, like she was testing the air between us. I smiled, a real one, not the tight kind I'd worn all weekend. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Too much in my head." She nodded, spooning a bite, then looked at me, her eyes searching. "Last night, that was brave, Sadie. I want to be like that someday." Her words caught me off guard, a warmth spreading in my chest. I saw myself in her, the quiet hunger to prove something, to break free. "You already are," I said, my voice steady. "You're just figuring out how to show it." She blushed, ducking her head, and we sat in comfortable silence, the clink of her spoon the only sound. I thought of the sketch I'd left in her room last night, a simple drawing of a horizon, my way of saying she could chase her own dreams. The back door opened and Mom stepped in her coat dusted with frost from an early walk. She paused, seeing me, her face softening in a way I hadn't seen all weekend. "You're still here," she said, almost a question. I nodded, sipping my coffee, the steam curling between us. "For a bit," I said. She set her keys down, hesitating, then sat across from me. I'm glad she whispered, her hands folding around her own mug, the one with a faded sunflower she'd always loved. We didn't talk about the jet or the fight or the years of silence. Not yet. But her sitting there, her eyes meeting mine without flinching, was enough for now. I felt the stirrings of something new, a fragile bridge between us. The kitchen clock ticked steady and slow, and I let myself breathe, let the moment hold me. This house, these people, they'd shaped me, broken me, but they didn't define me. I was starting to see that. The kitchen's quiet wrapped around us, Mom's sunflower mug steaming as she sat across from me. Lila had slipped upstairs, leaving us alone, the clock's soft ticks counting the seconds. I didn't rush to fill the silence. For once, it didn't feel like a wall. I sipped my coffee, its bitterness grounding me, and noticed a small chip on my mug's handle, a flaw I'd never seen before. It felt fitting, a reminder that even broken things could still hold something warm. Hannah's footsteps creaked on the stairs, and she paused at the kitchen doorway, her sweater loose, her face softer than last night. "You're leaving soon?" she asked, her voice careful, like she was stepping on thin ice. I nodded, setting my mug down. "Yeah, this afternoon." She hesitated, then slid into a chair, her hands folding on the table. "I didn't think you had it in you," she said, her eyes flickering to mine. "All this, the jet, the business, I was wrong." Her words were small, not an apology, but close, and they hung between us, fragile. I didn't leap to accept them. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw the sister who'd once braided my hair, who'd cried when I left for college. She was still there, buried under years of rivalry. "We both got things wrong," I said, my voice steady, not accusing. She nodded, her gaze dropping, and for a moment we were just two women, not enemies. I stood rinsing my mug, the water cold against my fingers. "I'd like to see you again," I said, glancing back at her. "Maybe coffee next month. No pressure." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile, but she nodded again, and it was enough. I didn't need her to love my life just to see it. That was new, that clarity, and it settled in me like a stone smoothed by a river. Outside, the frost had melted the lawn, glinting under the rising sun. I stepped onto the porch, my bag slung over my shoulder, and took a final look at the house. Its chipped paint, its sagging shutters, they held every fight, every laugh, every dream I'd carried. I wasn't leaving them behind, but I wasn't bound to them anymore. My car waited in the drive, the keys heavy in my pocket, and I felt a quiet strength, not loud or fierce, but steady, like the earth under my feet. I drove to the airstrip, the road winding past fields I'd run through as a kid. The jet was waiting, its silhouette sharp against the morning sky. I parked and sat for a moment, my hands still on the wheel, the engine's hum fading. I didn't need to prove anything anymore, not to them, not to myself. I was enough. I stepped out, the air crisp, and walked toward the jet, my steps light, my heart open, ready for whatever came next. The jet's engines hummed softly as I settled into my seat, the cabin's quiet wrapping around me like a blanket. Through the window, Ohio's fields blurred into patches of green and gold, fading as we climbed. I leaned back, my hands loose in my lap, the tension of the weekend unraveling with each mile. My bag sat at my feet, stuffed with clothes and a small notebook I'd started carrying, its pages already filling with thoughts I hadn't let myself voice before. Back home, my apartment felt different, though nothing had changed. The creaky hardwood, the mismatched mugs in the sink, the faint hum of the city outside, they were the same, but I saw them with new eyes. I set my keys on the counter, the clink loud in the stillness, and opened the notebook. I wrote about the weekend, not the fights or the jet, but the small moments, Lila's shy smile, Mom's hesitant hug, Hannah's half-step toward peace. Writing it down made it real, not just a memory to bury. The next morning I woke early, the sky still gray. Instead of checking emails, I walked to the corner deli, the one with the chipped sign and the best bagels. I ordered my usual cream cheese and lox, and sat by the window watching strangers hurry through the dawn. A man with a dog waved at me, his grin wide, and I waved back a small connection that felt like a gift. I hadn't done this in years, just sat, just watched, letting the world move without me chasing it. At my desk later, I sorted through sketches, old designs that hadn't made the cut. One caught my eye, a logo I'd drawn in college, simple but bold. It reminded me of who I'd been, full of hunger but scared to fail. I pinned it to my board, not as a trophy, but as a reminder I'd come far, but I was still learning. My phone buzzed a text from Marcus about a new client, and I smiled, typing a quick reply. Work felt lighter now, not a shield, but a choice. Evenings were quieter too. I started cooking again, simple things like pasta with herbs from the market. The smell of basil filled my kitchen, and I'd eat at the table, not the couch, savoring each bite. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, a rhythm I was building piece by piece. I thought of Mom, sometimes her hands around that sunflower mug, and wondered if she was finding her own way to heal. I hoped so, but I didn't carry that weight anymore. I pulled out the notebook again one night, the city's lights twinkling outside. I wrote about fear, how it had kept me small, how I'd let their doubts become my own. But I also wrote about strength, the kind that grows in silence and showing up for yourself. The pen moved faster, my thoughts spilling out, and when I stopped, I felt lighter, like I'd set something free. The past was still there, but it didn't own me. I closed the notebook, my breathing slow, and knew I was ready to keep going. A week later, I found myself at the park near my apartment, the one with the crooked benches and the oak trees that turned fiery in fall. I sat with my notebook, the pages now thick with ink, and watched a kid chase a kite, his laughter sharp in the crisp air. I didn't write "not today." I just let the moment be the wind tugging at my scarf, the world moving without my need to control it. I'd spent so long proving myself to them, to me, that I'd forgotten how to just sit to feel whole without a fight. I thought about Hannah, our tentative coffee plans still unmade, and Mom, who'd texted yesterday about a recipe she wanted to share. They were trying in their way, and I was too, but I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. I'd carried their voices in my head for years, letting their doubts shape me, but I was learning to let them go. Not with anger, but with a quiet step back, making room for my own voice, the one that knew my worth. I walked home slowly, the streets alive with evening bustle, and stopped at a bookstore, its window glowing with new releases. On impulse, I bought a journal, its cover, a soft blue, a gift for Lila. I mailed it that night with a note tucked inside, "Keep drawing, keep dreaming. You've got this." It wasn't much, but it felt right, a way to pass on the spark she'd given me to keep the circle growing. Back in my apartment, I lit a candle, its flicker casting shadows on the walls. I opened my notebook one last time, not to write, but to read, to trace the journey from that Thanksgiving table to now. I saw the hurt, the rage, but also the strength, the slow rebuilding of a woman who'd learned to stand tall. The lesson wasn't loud or grand. It was simple. You don't need everyone to see you to know you're enough. You just need to see yourself, flaws and all, and keep walking forward with grace for those who stumble, and for yourself when you do. I closed the notebook, the candle's glow steady, and felt a peace I hadn't known I could claim. The world outside hummed, but in here I was still rooted in a truth that no one could take. I'd built a life, not just a business, but a way of being, one choice, one breath at a time. And that was more than enough. What's a moment you found your own strength even when no one else saw it? Share it below. Let's lift each other up. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Here's to healing, to growing, and to finding your light.